There's nothing more dangerous for a colonial government than its citizens advocating for a better future. And that's exactly what happened in 1837. The rebellion wasn't led by political agitators or criminals. It was led by ordinary people, shopkeepers and farmers. And their crime was wanting a better life. Their punishment? Some were hanged, and some were sent to the farthest corners of the British Empire, places like this, the penal colony of Australia. I'm Stephanie Allen, and this is Dead Canadians Carved in Stone, where we dig into the history and the mystery of lives carved in stone. Today, I'm in Canada Bay, where a fight for a better life in Canada changed the Australian landscape. This is the story of the Exiled 58, men who fought a rebellion in Canada and were punished on the other side of the planet. Their legacy helped shape the country that would eventually become Canada. And the map of Sydney still remembers them. Canada, mostly forgot. By the 1830s, Lower Canada, roughly modern Quebec, was simmering with political frustration. The elected assembly, dominated by French-Canadian reformers known as the Patriots, had little real power. Decisions about taxation, spending, and administration were controlled by a small clique loyal to the British Crown, sometimes called the Chateau Clique. At the center of the reform movement was Louis-Joseph Papineau, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly. Papineau and the Patriots wanted responsible government, executives accountable to the elected assembly, and reforms to curb the colonial elite's power. London flat out refused. In 1837, the Russell Resolution rejected the Patriots' proposals, allowing officials to spend public funds without assembly approval. It was clear that peaceful reform had failed. Mass meetings spread, speeches grew sharper, boycotts were organized, and some patriots prepared for armed resistance. Governor Lord Gosford and colonial authorities saw danger, and when patriot leaders were arrested in late 1837, tensions erupted into open rebellion. The uprisings were brief and chaotic. Patriots, mostly farmers, clashed with British troops at Saint-Denis, St. Charles, and Saint-Eustache, only to be decisively defeated. Hundreds were arrested. Some fled to the United States, and 12 were executed in Montreal's Pierre-de-Courant prison. It was a stark warning to others. 58 were sentenced to transportation, exile to the far side of the British Empire. In 1840, they boarded the prison ship Buffalo, bound for Sydney, a journey of over 16,000 kilometers. While London reshaped the colony politically, these men faced life at the edge of a penal colony. The Patriots' voyage lasted nearly 5 months. Conditions aboard convict ships were harsh. Confined quarters below deck, shackled at night, and disease was a constant threat. Yet these were not ordinary convicts. Many were farmers, tradesmen, and community leaders. They had skills. They expected prison or execution. But instead they were carried farther than they could even imagine, towards a land most had never even heard of. When the Buffalo arrived in Sydney Harbor in February 1841, the prisoners were taken to Longbottom Stockade, west of the city along the Parramatta River. They faced hard labor, breaking stone, building roads, and clearing bushland under the watchful eye of guards. Yet these men were recognized as political prisoners. News of their fate reached Canada, where public sympathy slowly grew. Over time, some prisoners were assigned lighter duties or allowed supervised freedom. A few even worked for private employers. Today, the names Canada Bay, Exile Bay, and France Bay still mark the landscape as quiet reminders of Canadian political history embedded in an Australian city. Were they rebels, traitors, or architects of reform? Back in British North America, the conversation shifted. John Lambton, the first Earl of Durham, investigated the rebellions in 1838. His Durham Report concluded that the uprisings reflected structural problems in governments, not mere lawlessness. Durham recommended that colonial executives be accountable to elected assemblies. Within a decade, responsible governments, the reform the Patriots had demanded, began to take root in the province of Canada. The irony is clear. Men condemned as rebels were fighting for ideas that would reshape British colonial policy. History still debates how to remember them. Were they reckless insurgents or early champions of democracy? In Quebec, they're often remembered as heroes. Louis-Joseph Papineau and the Patriots are commemorated on National Patriots' Day. For the 58 in Australia, those debates were distant, but their story sits at a crossroads of Canadian reform, the British Empire, and the geography of Sydney. Exile was meant to be permanent, but political winds in Canada shifted. Public pressure grew. By 1843, colonial authorities began granting conditional pardons. By the mid-1840s, most had freedom through pardons or tickets to leave. Some remained in Australia, and others returned to their land of their birth. Gradually, the former rebels made their way home to a colony that was already changing politically. The rebellions had failed militarily, but their impact endured. The Act of Union of 1840 merged Upper and Lower Canada, and responsible government slowly took root. These reforms, the very ones they had demanded, helped shape the path to Confederation in 1867. Where are the rebels of the Lower Canada Rebellion remembered? Some executed patriots are buried in Notre-Dame-de-Neige Cemetery in Montreal. Pierre-au-Courant Prison is also preserved as a National Historic Site. Across the ocean here in Australia, Canada Bay and Exile Bay in Sydney quietly honor those transported rebels. In Quebec, many patriots lie in small parish cemeteries, their stories woven into the broader narrative of the country. History sometimes travels in unexpected ways. The story of the Exiled 58 stretches from the villages of Lower Canada to a bay here in Australia. Their rebellion failed in the military sense, but it reshaped the path of political reform in Canada. Even as most of the Exiled 58 eventually returned home, one man stayed behind, Joseph Marceau. He built a life here in New South Wales. He became a farmer, raised a family, and lived for nearly 40 years in the land that was once meant to be his prison. His grave in West Dapto Catholic Cemetery, alongside that of his wife, Mary Catherine Barrett, is a quiet but powerful reminder that the rebellion's reach was not only political, it was personal, stretching across geography and generations. Marceau's story shows that exile was more than distance. It was a test of resilience and adaptation. The bay here in New South Wales, named for the transported patriots, and nearby Exile Bay, are living traces of a Canadian struggle for representative government that landed thousands of kilometers away. Even today, a man from Quebec, buried in New South Wales, reminds us that ordinary people can challenge authority, endure displacement, and leave a lasting mark on the world. His grave stands as a small but meaningful bridge between Canadian and Australian history, a single marker linking a rebellion in Quebec to the shores of Sydney, Australia, showing just how far the echoes of those struggles can travel. Today, Canada Bay carries their memory in the map of Sydney. A rebellion that began in the small villages along the St. Lawrence Valley left its mark 16,000 kilometers away, and still reminds us that ordinary people can challenge authority and leave a lasting legacy. I'm Stephanie Allen, on location at Canada Bay in Sydney, Australia. This is where Canada's fight for responsible government landed in 1840. That's an awful long way from home, but it ended up in our Constitution, thanks in part to the rebels who fought in 1837 and 1838, some of whom were executed and some transported to the farthest corners of the British Empire, like Canada Bay, Australia. Until we meet again, I'm Stephanie Allen for Dead Canadians.